The sacred shifting grounds lay bathed in silver moonlight, a circle of ancient stones that had witnessed 1,000 transformations. 20-year-old Yuri William stood at its center, her dark hair whipping around her face in the autumn wind, her hands clenched so tightly her nails drew blood from her palms. Around her, the entire pack had gathered, their eyes gleaming with anticipation, not of celebration, but of spectacle. The wolfless failure graces us with her presence. Alpha Lord Kaelen's voice cut through the night air like a blade. He stood at the edge of the circle, tall and imposing, his silver-streaked hair marking him as the territory's absolute authority. "How generous of you to provide tonight's entertainment, Yuri." The crowd's laughter rolled over her in waves. Some faces showed pity, most showed contempt, but all showed certainty that she was broken, defective, a stain on the pack's honor. Yuri's golden eyes, the only hint of the wolf she should possess, scanned the crowd desperately, searching for even one sympathetic face. She found none. At 20, she was 2 years past the age when every werewolf completed their first shift. She was living proof of an impossibility, a wolf who could not transform. "Perhaps we should help her along," came the silky voice of Lady Isolde, Kaelen's mother, from her position of honor beside the Alpha Lord. The elderly woman's smile was all venom. "Shall we remind her what real wolves look like?" 3 young wolves, Kaelen's personal guard, stepped forward and shifted with fluid grace. Their transformations were seamless, beautiful, their wolves powerful and sure. They circled Yuri slowly, deliberately, forcing her to turn and turn again to keep them all in sight. Their low growls made her heart hammer against her ribs. "Stop this," Yuri whispered, hating the tremor in her voice. "Please. Speak up, orphan," Kaelen commanded, stepping closer to the circle's edge. "If you have words, let the pack hear them. Tell us why you continue to disgrace us with your existence. Tell us why we should continue to waste food and shelter on a creature who cannot even perform the most basic function of our kind." Yuri's throat closed. She had asked herself these questions every day since she turned 18, and nothing happened. She had tried everything: meditation with the pack's elder, ancient rituals, fasting, prayer. She had pushed herself to exhaustion, reached so deep within herself that she thought she might die from the strain. But there was never anything there. Just emptiness where her wolf should be. She began, but her voice cracked. "She what?" Kaelen turned to address the assembled pack, his voice rich with theatrical concern. "She apologizes for her failure? She promises to try harder." He laughed, and the sound was cruel. 20 years of trying and still nothing. "Tell me, Yuri William, what makes you think tonight will be any different?" Something flickered in Yuri's chest then. Not the wolf she desperately sought, but something else. Something that had been compressed and compressed under years of shame until it had crystallized into something harder, darker. It felt like rage, but rage mixed with a strange heat that made her skin prickle and her vision sharpen. "I don't know," she said, and this time her voice didn't shake. She lifted her chin, meeting Kaelen's gaze directly for the first time in years. "But I am still here, still standing. Whatever I am or am not, I survive." For just a heartbeat, something shifted in the air. A few of the older pack members exchanged glances. One of the circling wolves faltered mid-step, his ears flattening briefly before he recovered. But Kaelen's expression darkened, his jaw tightening. "Survival isn't strength, girl. It's just stubbornness." He made a sharp gesture. "Everyone has seen enough. Return to your quarters. Perhaps tomorrow we'll discuss whether the pack has any further use for dead weight." The threat was clear. Yuri had been tolerated until now as an object of ridicule, useful for reminding others of what happened to failures. But patience had limits, and Kaelen's patience had apparently run out. As Yuri walked through the parted crowd, she felt every eye upon her, heard every whispered word. Pathetic. Her parents, must be rolling in their graves. They say her mother was the same, weak bloodline. Kaelen should have exiled her years ago. She made it to the edge of the grounds before her knees buckled. She caught herself against an ancient oak, her whole body shaking with humiliation and something else. That strange heat was still there, coiled in her chest like a sleeping serpent. Yuri. She spun to find old mystic Alara standing in the shadows, her weathered face carved with concern. The pack's eldest advisor was wrapped in layers of dark cloth, her silver hair gleaming in the moonlight. "Not now, Alara," Yuri whispered. "Please. Child, listen to me." Alara stepped closer, her ancient eyes searching Yuri's face. "What you experienced tonight, that moment when you looked at Kaelen and something changed. Did you feel it?" Yuri's hand moved unconsciously to her chest. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do." Alara's voice dropped to barely more than a breath. "You felt power, didn't you? Not the absence of it. The presence of something so vast that it terrifies you." "I'm wolfless," Yuri said, the word like ash in her mouth. "Everyone knows." "Everyone knows nothing." Alara's hand shot out, gripping Yuri's wrist with surprising strength. "You are not wolfless, Yuri William. You never were. You are something far more dangerous, far more powerful than any of these fools could imagine. And that heat you feel building inside you? That's not emptiness trying to fill itself. That's a dam about to break." Yuri stared at the old woman, her heart pounding. "What are you saying?" Alara glanced back toward the shifting grounds, where the ceremony continued without them. When she looked back at Yuri, her expression was grave. "I'm saying that your inability to shift was never weakness. It was a cage. Your body has been trying to contain something too powerful, too ancient to be held by a normal transformation. And Kaelen senses it, even if he doesn't understand it. That's why he wants you gone. Not because you're weak, but because some instinct warns him that you're the greatest threat he'll ever face." "That's impossible," Yuri breathed.
"I'm nobody."
"I'm nothing. You are the last living descendant of the True Alpha Bloodline," Alara said, and the words fell between them like thunder. "And whether you're ready or not, child, your power is beginning to wake." Yuri opened her mouth to argue, to deny, to laugh at the absurdity, but the words died in her throat. Because as Alara spoke, that coiled heat in her chest pulsed once, twice, like a second heartbeat. And for just an instant, her reflection in Alara's eyes showed something that made her blood run cold and hot at once. Her eyes were glowing.
"Pure, molten gold."
Then the moment passed, and they were just golden brown again. Normal.
"Human."
"What's happening to me?" Yuri whispered. Alara's expression softened with something like pity, or perhaps fear. "The same thing that happened to your mother, child, and to her mother before her. You're remembering what you really are." She released Yuri's wrist and stepped back into the shadows. "Go to your quarters.
Rest.
But be ready. When the awakening begins, it will not ask your permission. It will simply be." That night, Yuri lay on her narrow cot in the servants' quarters beneath the main pack house. The room was small and cold, with stone walls that wept moisture and a single narrow window that let in the moonlight. She had lived here since her parents died when she was 10, since the night of the accident, that no one would explain to her. She couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt it again, that pulse of heat, that flash of power. She saw Kaelen's face darkening with something that might have been fear. Felt the moment when the circling wolf had faltered. Had it really happened? Or had she imagined it, desperate for any scrap of dignity after yet another humiliation? Yuri's hand found the small pendant at her throat, a silver disc engraved with a symbol she'd never understood. Her father had pressed it into her hand the night he died, his voice urgent. "Keep this hidden, little wolf. Never let them see it. When the time comes, you'll understand." She'd been 10. She hadn't understood anything. She still didn't. But as her fingers traced the engraved symbol, that heat pulsed again, stronger this time. And in the darkness of her room, Yuri could have sworn her shadow on the wall shifted, grew larger, darker, more feral. Sleep finally claimed her, but it brought no peace. In her dreams, she ran through an endless forest, pursued by something vast and golden-eyed. When she finally turned to face it, she found herself staring at a magnificent black wolf with eyes like molten suns and markings that seemed to glow with their own light. The wolf opened its jaws and spoke in a voice that resonated in her very bones.
Soon.
Yuri woke with a gasp, her heart racing, her skin slick with sweat. Dawn light crept through her window. Outside, she could hear the pack beginning to stir. Another day of servitude awaited. Another day of being the wolfless failure, the pack's greatest shame. But as Yuri rose and dressed, she found herself thinking of Alara's words, of that pulse of power, of the wolf in her dreams that felt less like a fantasy and more like a memory. She splashed cold water on her face from the basin, and when she looked up into the cracked mirror above it, she froze. Her reflection stared back at her with eyes that held just the faintest trace of gold light. Not enough to be obvious, but enough to be undeniable. Something was waking inside her. Something ancient, powerful, and utterly terrifying. And deep in her bones, Yuri knew with absolute certainty, when it fully emerged, nothing, not Kaelen, not his mother, not the entire pack, would be able to stop it. The only question was whether it would save her or destroy her. Or perhaps both. Alpha Ronan Valerius arrived 3 days after the ceremony, and his presence changed the air itself. Yuri felt it from the kitchens where she scrubbed floors, a shift in pressure that made every wolf in the territory go still and silent, the way prey freezes when a larger predator enters the clearing. She emerged from the servants' entrance to find the main courtyard transformed into a display of barely concealed hostility. Kaelen stood at the top of the stone steps, his posture rigid, while below him stood a man who made even the Alpha Lord look diminished. Ronan Valerius was tall and broad-shouldered, his dark hair touched with silver at the temples despite appearing no older than 35. He wore travel-worn leather and carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who had nothing left to prove. But it was his eyes that made Yuri's breath catch, pale gray, like winter storms, and utterly unafraid. "I don't recall inviting you to my territory, Valerius," Kaelen said, his voice tight with controlled rage. "I don't recall needing your invitation." Ronan's tone was mild, almost pleasant, which somehow made it more dangerous. "I'm here on behalf of the Northern Council to investigate certain irregularities surrounding King Aldric's death. I trust you'll extend appropriate cooperation. King Aldric died in an accident. The matter is closed." Funny thing about accidents. Ronan tilted his head slightly. They tend to leave evidence, witnesses, bodies that don't quite match the official story. His storm-gray eyes swept the assembled crowd with calculated precision. "I'll need to interview your pack members, starting with those who were present at the hunt." Kaelen's hand moved to rest on the hilt of his blade. "You overstep, outsider. I'm an alpha investigating the murder of our true king. The only one overstepping here is you, assuming you have something to hide." Ronan smiled, showing teeth. "Do you, Lord Kaelen?" The tension crackled like lightning about to strike. Every wolf present could sense it, 2 apex predators circling, measuring, neither willing to yield. Lady Isolde stepped forward, her voice dripping false hospitality. "Please, Alpha Valerius, we have nothing to hide. Allow us to offer refreshment while we prepare the records you require." Ronan's gaze shifted to her, assessing. How generous. That was when Yuri made her mistake. As the crowd began to disperse, she moved to follow the other servants back inside, and the wind shifted. Just slightly. Just enough. Ronan's head snapped toward her, his nostrils flaring. His entire body went still, his eyes locking onto her with an intensity that made her freeze mid-step. Something flickered across his expression, confusion, then recognition, then something that looked almost like pain. "You," he said, the single word cutting through the murmured conversations. "Come here." Yuri's heart hammered. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but decades of survival had taught her that disobedience meant punishment. She walked forward on unsteady legs, keeping her eyes lowered. "Look at me," Ronan commanded, but his voice was gentle, curious rather than cruel. She raised her eyes to meet his and watched his pupils dilate. He inhaled sharply, taking a half-step closer. "What's your name?" "Yuri, my lord." "Yuri William." "William." He repeated the name as if tasting it. "And you serve House Ironhold?" "She is my ward," Kaelen interjected, descending the steps with predatory grace. "An orphan I charitably took in, though she's proven quite the disappointment." His hand shot out, gripping Yuri's upper arm hard enough to bruise. "Wolfless at 20. A defect. Hardly worth your attention. Alpha Valerius." Yuri saw Ronan's eyes drop to where Kaelen's fingers dug into her flesh. His expression didn't change, but the temperature seemed to plummet. "Release her." "I beg your pardon?" "I don't recall stuttering." Ronan's voice was soft, deadly. "Take your hand off her."
Now.
Kaelen's grip tightened instead, his lips curling into a sneer. "I discipline my own household as I see fit." He didn't finish. Ronan moved with liquid speed, his hand clamping around Kaelen's wrist with crushing force. "I said release her." For a suspended heartbeat, no one breathed. Then Kaelen's hand opened, and Yuri stumbled back, cradling her bruised arm. The two alphas stood locked together, power crackling between them like a visible force. "You defend a wolfless servant?" Kaelen hissed. Has the great Ronan Valerius grown soft? Ronan's smile was all edges. "I defend those who cannot defend themselves. It's what separates alphas from tyrants." He released Kaelen's wrist and turned to Yuri, his expression softening. "Are you harmed?" "No, my lord," she whispered, though her arm throbbed. Those storm-gray eyes searched her face, and Yuri felt inexplicably exposed, as if he could see straight through to that coiled heat in her chest. "Good," he said quietly. Then, to the assembled crowd, "I'll begin my interviews tomorrow, and I'll speak with Yuri William first." As he strode away, Yuri felt Kaelen's rage like a physical weight. She didn't need to look at him to know she'd pay dearly for this attention. But beneath her fear, that strange heat pulsed once more, responding to something in Ronan's scent. Something that whispered of recognition, of destiny, of a bond her conscious mind couldn't yet name. Alara found Yuri in the herb garden just after midnight, when the moon hung full and heavy overhead. Yuri had come seeking solitude after another brutal day of Kaelen's silent fury, but the old mystic emerged from the shadows as if she'd been waiting. "Your mother used to come here," Alara said without preamble, her weathered hands sorting through dried lavender with practiced ease. When the weight of what she carried became too much to bear, Yuri's throat tightened. "You knew my mother." "I knew your grandmother. And her mother before that." Alara's ancient eyes fixed on Yuri with an intensity that made her want to look away. "I've been keeper of secrets for the True Alpha Bloodline for 60 years, child. And you are the last." The words hung in the night air, impossible and terrifying. "That's insane." The True Alpha line died with King Aldrich. King Aldrich had no children that the realm acknowledged, but his younger sister did. Alara moved closer, her voice dropping to barely more than breath. "Your grandmother, Yuri. She was Aldrich's sister, hidden away and married to a minor noble to protect her from those who would see the pure bloodline ended. Your mother inherited that legacy. And so do you." Yuri's legs felt weak.
No. I'm wolfless.
"I'm nothing. You are everything they fear." Alara's hand shot out, pressing against Yuri's chest where that coiled heat lived. What you feel here, this pressure, this caged power, it's not absence. It's a dam holding back an ocean. The true alpha core doesn't manifest like ordinary wolves. It doesn't shift on command at 18 or 20. It waits until the vessel is strong enough to contain it without being destroyed. Then why now? Why am I still? Because Kaelen murdered your parents before your mother could complete your awakening ritual. Alera's words were sharp as knives. The night they died wasn't an accident. Kaelen discovered who you were, who you could become. He killed them to prevent the ritual and planned to kill you once you were old enough that your continued wolflessness would seem natural. A tragic defect. No one would question it. Yuri's hands trembled. The ritual. Can it still be done? With the right catalyst. The right moment. Alera pressed something into Yuri's palm. A ring. Ancient silver with a black stone that seemed to swallow light. This was your grandmother's. The true alpha seal. When the time comes, when your power breaks free, this will anchor you. Without it, the awakening could tear you apart. The ring thrummed against Yuri's skin, warm and alive. She slipped it onto her finger, and that coiled heat pulsed in response, recognition singing through her blood. How will I know when? You'll know. Alera's expression softened with something like sorrow. Your mate has already found you, hasn't he? Alpha Valerius. The bond is beginning to form. That's the first catalyst. Yuri's breath caught. He can't be. The true alpha's mate is always another alpha. Someone strong enough to stand beside that power without being consumed by it. Alera gripped Yuri's shoulders. Listen to me carefully. Kaelen will try to kill Valerius. He's already planning it. And when he does, your power will respond to protect your mate. That's when the dam will break. That's when you'll need to run to the sanctuary of the first core. I'll meet you there to complete the ritual your mother began. Before Yuri could respond, footsteps echoed on the stone path. Alera melted into the shadows, leaving Yuri alone as Ronan Valerius emerged into the moonlight. I thought I might find you here. His storm-gray eyes studied her with unnerving perception. You couldn't sleep either. Too much on my mind, my lord. Ronan. Just Ronan. He moved closer and Yuri's pulse quickened. I've spent the day reviewing records, interviewing witnesses. Do you know what I've learned? She shook her head, not trusting her voice. That 10 years ago, 2 minor nobles died in a hunting accident. Sebastian and Elena William. Your parents. His voice gentled. But the coroner's report shows wounds inconsistent with animal attacks. Silver poisoning. The method used to execute traitors. Tears burned behind Yuri's eyes. Why are you telling me this? Because your family didn't die in an accident. They were murdered. And I believe the same person who killed them killed King Aldrich. He stepped closer still, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. Your parents were protecting something. Someone. I think that someone was you. Yuri's hand closed around the ring, feeling its pulse against her palm.
I'm nobody.
I'm wolfless. You're not wolfless. Ronan's hand rose, his fingers barely brushing her cheek. I've lived a long time, Yuri William. I know what power smells like. And you. His voice dropped to a whisper. You smell like lightning before a storm, like something ancient and vast and barely contained. So tell me, what are you really? The ring burned against her skin. The coiled heat surged in her chest. And somewhere deep in the shadows, Yuri felt Alera watching, waiting. I don't know yet, she whispered, but I think I'm about to find out. Yuri knew something was wrong when she overheard Lady Isolde's whispered conversation in the corridor outside the kitchens. The words "forbidden forest," "tonight," and "silver blades" were enough to turn her blood to ice. She followed them at a distance, using every servant's trick she'd learned to remain invisible. Kaelen led a hunting party of 6, his most loyal guards, into the dark woods where werewolves rarely ventured, where the ancient trees grew so thick that moonlight barely penetrated. And at the center of the party, seemingly unaware, walked Ronan Valerius. They'd lured him with promises of evidence, of witnesses who would speak only in secret. Yuri's heart hammered as she watched from behind a massive oak, seeing the trap unfold like a nightmare she couldn't wake from. "I apologize, Alpha Valerius," Kaelen said, his voice carrying false regret. "But you've become inconvenient." The attack came from all sides. 6 wolves, already shifted, lunged at Ronan with coordinated precision. But it wasn't tooth and claw they wielded. It was silver. Silver-coated claws. Silver-tipped fangs. Weapons that burned werewolf flesh like acid and prevented healing. Ronan shifted instantly, his massive gray wolf barely avoiding the first strike. But 6 against 1, all armed with silver. The outcome was inevitable. Yuri watched in horror as silver claws raked across his flank, drawing a howl of agony. Another strike hit his shoulder. He was fighting brilliantly, viciously, but he was being driven down through sheer numbers and poison. Kaelen stood apart, still in human form, watching with cold satisfaction. "Nothing personal, Valerius. But the dead king's secrets die with you." Something inside Yuri snapped. It wasn't a decision. It wasn't bravery. It was pure, incandescent rage that exploded outward from that place in her chest where the coiled heat lived. She didn't remember running forward. Didn't remember screaming. All she knew was that Ronan was dying, her mate was dying, and something vast and ancient inside her simply refused to allow it. The world slowed. One of Kaelen's guards turned toward her, jaws open, silver fangs gleaming. Yuri raised her hand to shield herself, and power erupted from her core like a dam bursting. Her eyes ignited, burning gold so bright they lit the clearing like twin suns. Her muscles surged with impossible strength. When her hand connected with the attacking wolf's skull, the impact sent the creature flying backward into a tree with bone-shattering force. The sound echoed through the forest like thunder. Yuri's vision sharpened to predatory clarity. She could see every heartbeat, smell every drop of fierce sweat, hear the whisper of claws through air. She moved like lightning, her body operating on instincts she'd never possessed. A second wolf lunged. She caught it mid-leap by the throat, her grip iron-strong, and slammed it into the ground hard enough to crater the earth. Her lips pulled back, and she felt fangs, long, razor-sharp, real fangs, extend from her gums. A growl tore from her throat that didn't sound human, didn't sound like any wolf she'd ever heard. It sounded ancient, terrible, absolute. The remaining guards scattered. Kaelen's eyes went wide with something Yuri had never seen in them before, genuine fear. "Impossible," he breathed. "You're wolfless." "Wrong." Yuri snarled, her voice layered with something that vibrated in her bones. She stepped toward him, golden light spilling from her eyes like liquid flame. "I was never wolfless. I was caged." But the power was too much, too fast, burning through her untrained body like wildfire. Pain lanced through her chest, her muscles, her very bones. She'd saved Ronan, driven off the attackers, but now the dam had broken, and the flood was drowning her from within. She collapsed to her knees, gasping. Blood trickled from her nose, her ears. Her eyes flickered between gold and brown, her body convulsing as the power tried to tear itself free and her mortality tried to contain it. Ronan was there instantly, shifted back to human form despite his injuries. He caught her before she hit the ground, his arms iron-strong around her shaking body. "Yuri, listen to me.
Breathe.
Focus on my voice." "Can't control." Her words came between gasps. "Too much. I know. I know what you are." His hand pressed against her chest where her heart threatened to explode. "You're true alpha, and you're not ready. But you're alive, do you hear me? You saved us both." Kaelen's voice cut through the clearing, ragged with fury and terror. You just signed your death warrant, aberration. Both of you. But Ronan's storm-gray eyes never left Yuri's face. Run, he told Kaelen softly, without looking at him. Because when she learns to control this power, you won't survive her wrath. Yuri's consciousness spiraled, the golden light in her eyes dimming as her body finally surrendered to the overwhelming surge. Her last thought before darkness claimed her was that the ring on her finger burned like a brand, anchoring her to life even as power tried to consume her whole. The true Alpha had finally awakened, but the awakening was far from complete. Yuri woke in Ronan's chambers, wrapped in fine linens that smelled of pine and steel. Her body ached in ways she'd never experienced, as if every muscle had been torn and rewoven. The golden light was gone from her eyes, the power retreated back into its cage, but the memory of it sang in her blood like an echo that wouldn't fade. Ronan sat beside the bed, his injuries already healing thanks to his alpha constitution. When his storm-gray eyes met hers, something profound passed between them: recognition, certainty, inevitability. "You carried me here," she whispered. "I wasn't about to leave you in that forest for Kaelen to finish." His hand found hers, threading their fingers together. "Yuri, what happened last night, what you did, was a mistake, an accident." Fear clawed at her throat. "Ronan, you have to forget what you saw. If Kaelen finds out, I don't care what Kaelen thinks." Ronan's voice was steel. "You're my mate. I knew at the moment I caught your scent, but last night confirmed it beyond any doubt. The true Alpha Bloodline recognizes its equal." He stood, still holding her hand. "And I'm going to claim you. Publicly. Today."
No.
The word came out desperate. "You can't. Your position, your territory, mean nothing without you." He lifted her hand to his lips. "I'm done hiding what we are." The council convened within the hour. Every ranking wolf in the territory crowded into the great hall, summoned by Ronan's authority. Yuri stood beside him, feeling every eye upon her, every whisper cutting like silver blades. Ronan's voice rang out clear and absolute. "I, Alpha Ronan Valerius, claim Yuri William as my destined mate. I recognize in her the ancient bloodline of the true Alphas, and I pledge my life, my territory, and my loyalty to her and her alone." The hall erupted.
Gasps. Shouts.
Disbelief rippling through the crowd like shockwaves. But before anyone could respond, Kaelen rose from his seat, Lady Isolde beside him, both wearing expressions of calculated triumph. "How noble," Kaelen said, his voice dripping venom. "How utterly tragic that your mate is the daughter of confirmed traitors." He produced a rolled parchment, aged and official-looking. "Documents we've recently rediscovered. Proof that Sebastian and Elena William conspired to assassinate King Aldrich. They were executed for treason, not killed in any accident." Lady Isolde's smile was razor-sharp. "The crown ordered their deaths. Claiming their daughter as your mate, Alpha Valerius, is tantamount to declaring yourself an enemy of the realm. Is she truly worth destroying your reputation, your alliances, your legacy?" Yuri felt the weight of every eye in the hall, saw the doubt creeping across faces that had moments ago shown interest, heard the whispers beginning. "Traitor's daughter. Wolfless and cursed. He's bewitched." And she saw Ronan's jaw tighten, saw him preparing to fight this battle regardless of cost. He would burn every bridge, sacrifice every alliance, destroy everything he'd built for her. For a girl who couldn't even shift, who'd shown one moment of uncontrolled power and then collapsed like the broken thing she truly was. She couldn't let him do it. "No," Yuri said, her voice cutting through the chaos. She stepped away from Ronan, putting distance between them even as it tore something vital in her chest. "Alpha Valerius is mistaken. There is no mate bond. There is no hidden power. I am exactly what you all see, a pathetic, Wolfless Girl, daughter of traitors, worth nothing. Yuri, Ronan's voice was anguished. I reject your claim, Alpha Valerius. The words felt like swallowing glass. I am not your mate. I am not true Alpha. I am nothing. She met his storm gray eyes, trying to pour apology into her gaze even as she destroyed them both. Last night was desperation, adrenaline, nothing more. The council is right to question this folly. I release you from any obligation. The silence that followed was suffocating. Ronan stared at her as if she'd driven a blade through his heart. Around them, the council murmured approval, relief, satisfaction that order had been restored. Kaelen's smile was victorious. How sensible. The girl knows her place. Yuri turned and walked from the hall, every step agony, the ring on her finger burning like accusation. She'd saved Ronan's political life by destroying his heart, by destroying her own. But as she fled to her cold servant's quarters, she didn't see Ronan's expression shift from pain to understanding to grim determination. Didn't hear him tell the council, this isn't over. And she didn't know that Kaelen, watching her retreat, had already ordered her assassination for that very night. The girl who'd shown even a flicker of true alpha power could not be allowed to live, mate bond or not, claim or not. Yuri curled on her narrow cot, clutching her grandmother's ring, and wept for the future she'd just burned to ash. The assassins came at midnight, silent as death itself. Yuri woke to cold steel pressed against her throat, Kaelen's face looming above her in the darkness, his smile grotesque with anticipation. Did you truly think I'd let you live after what you showed us? His blade pressed harder, drawing blood. True alpha or not, you die tonight, and with you, the last threat to my rule. Yuri's hand closed around her grandmother's ring, that coiled heat surging desperately, but she was untrained, exhausted, and the power wouldn't come. Her eyes flickered gold for just an instant before fading. Not enough. Not fast enough. The window exploded inward. Ronan crashed through in full wolf form, a massive gray beast radiating fury. He hit Kaelen like an avalanche, sending him flying across the small room. Two other assassins lunged, but Ronan tore through them with brutal efficiency, all pretense of civilization stripped away. Run. Ronan's voice echoed in her mind through the mate bond she'd tried to deny. North. To the old stones.
Now.
Yuri ran. Behind her, she heard Kaelen's enraged howls, the sound of pursuit, but Ronan held them back, buying her precious seconds with his own blood. She crashed through the forest, branches tearing at her skin, lungs burning, until she saw the ancient standing stones rising from the earth like broken teeth. Alara waited there, staff in hand, her expression urgent. Quickly, child. The celestial convergence has already begun. Above them, the night sky blazed with impossible light. 3 moons, red, silver, and gold, aligned in perfect symmetry, an event that occurred once in a generation. The standing stones hummed with ancient power, responding to the cosmic alignment. Ronan emerged from the trees moments later, bloodied but alive, already shifting back to human form. Kaelen's forces were minutes behind them. There's no time for the full ritual, Alara said, pulling Yuri to the center of the stone circle. But the convergence will amplify what's already inside you. You must let go, Yuri. Stop fighting your nature. Stop caging your power. Embrace what you are, or we all die here tonight. I don't know how. Yes, you do. Ronan took her hand, his storm gray eyes blazing with absolute faith. I felt it in the forest. That wasn't fear or desperation. That was you, Yuri. Your true self, finally breaking free. The sounds of pursuit grew louder. Wolves howling. Kaelen's voice commanding his forces to surround them. Alara began chanting in a language older than memory, her staff striking the earth in rhythm with the pulsing stones. The ring on Yuri's finger blazed with heat, and that coiled power in her chest began to unravel, no longer a caged thing but a rising tide. "Let it out," Ronan whispered against her ear. "I'm right here. You won't lose yourself. I won't let you." Yuri closed her eyes and stopped fighting. The dam didn't break this time. It dissolved. Power flooded through her in a golden wave that felt like coming home, like remembering something she'd always known. Her body shifted, not the painful, forced transformation she'd witnessed in others, but a seamless melting and reforming, as natural as breathing. When she opened her eyes, the world had transformed. Colors were sharper, scents more vivid, sounds crystalline. She stood on 4 legs, and when she looked down at her paws, she saw black fur that seemed to absorb starlight, marked with golden patterns that pulsed with inner fire. She was magnificent, massive, a wolf that dwarfed even Ronan's alpha form. Her eyes blazed pure gold, and when she threw back her head and howled, the sound carried ancient authority that made every wolf within miles instinctively submit. Kaelen's forces burst through the trees and froze. Every single one of them, wolves and humans alike, dropped to their knees, unable to resist the primal command of true alpha presence. Kaelen himself staggered, fighting the compulsion with visible strain. "No," he gasped. "This is impossible." Yuri padded forward, each step carrying weight and power. She didn't need to attack. Her mere presence was judgment. When she fixed her golden gaze on Kaelen, he finally broke, his body forcing itself into submission despite his desperate resistance. "The true alpha has awakened," Ilara's voice rang out, reverent and triumphant. "And the pretender's reign is ended." Ronan shifted beside her, his gray wolf pressing against her larger black form in solidarity and devotion. Through their bond, she felt his pride, his love, his absolute certainty that this was always her destiny. Yuri looked down at Kaelen, cowering before her, and understood with perfect clarity what came next. It was time to reclaim her throne. 3 weeks of intensive training at the sanctuary had transformed Yuri from a frightened girl into something the realm hadn't seen in generations, a true alpha who knew her power and wielded it with absolute certainty. When word reached them of Kaelen's planned coronation, the ceremony where he would officially claim the throne of the fallen King Aldrich, Yuri knew the moment had come. She rode into the capital at dawn with a force of merely 20 loyal wolves, those who had recognized her authority at the Standing Stones and pledged themselves to the True Bloodline. Ronan rode beside her, his presence steady and sure, but this was her battle to fight. The great cathedral blazed with torchlight and ceremony. Every alpha from the 7 territories had gathered, their banners hanging from the ancient pillars. At the altar stood Kaelen, resplendent in stolen royal regalia, the crown of King Aldrich glinting in his hands. Lady Isolde watched from her place of honor, her expression triumphant. The high priest raised his hands to begin the consecration. "By the ancient rites and the will of the council, we gather to crown." "You gather to crown a murderer and a traitor." Yuri's voice cut through the cathedral like a blade. She strode down the center aisle, her dark hair flowing behind her, the silver ring gleaming on her finger. Her eyes held the faintest trace of gold, power leashed but visible. The assembled alphas erupted in chaos.
Shouts.
Outrage. Kaelen's face twisted with fury. "Seize her. The wolfless aberration dares." "I am not wolfless." Yuri's voice carried ancient authority that silenced the cathedral instantly. "I am Yuri William, granddaughter of Princess Elena Trueblood, last surviving descendant of the True Alpha line. And I am here to claim what is mine." She let the power rise, no longer fighting it, no longer afraid. The transformation was seamless and terrible in its beauty. Her black wolf form materialized in the cathedral, massive and magnificent, golden markings blazing like living fire along her fur. Her eyes burned molten gold, ancient and absolute. The pressure of true alpha authority crashed over the cathedral like a tidal wave. It wasn't a request or a challenge. It was a primal command that reached into the wolf soul of every creature present and demanded submission. The nearest alphas dropped to their knees instantly, unable to resist. Then the next rank. Then the next. Within seconds, every alpha in the cathedral, warriors who had never bowed to anyone, leaders who commanded territories of their own, were forced to their knees by the sheer weight of her bloodline's power. Kaelen fought it. She could see him straining, his muscles locked, sweat pouring down his face as he resisted with everything he had. But even his considerable strength meant nothing against true alpha authority. His legs buckled. His body betrayed him. He collapsed to his knees, the stolen crown clattering to the stone floor. Lady Isolde, too, was forced down, her face contorted with impotent rage. Yuri padded forward, her massive paws silent on the cathedral stone. When she reached Kaelen, she shifted back to human form, standing above him in her power while he knelt in his shame. "You murdered King Aldrich to steal his throne," she said, her voice resonating through the vast space. "You murdered my parents to hide my bloodline. You orchestrated assassinations, fabricated evidence, and ruled through terror." She turned to address the assembled alphas, all still kneeling. "I am the last true alpha, and I claim my birthright. Who among you dares challenge me?" The silence was absolute. No one moved. No one spoke. The pressure of her authority was undeniable, irrefutable proof of what she was. Ronan stepped forward, shifting to his wolf form and bowing his head in formal submission, not in subjugation, but in recognition of her sovereignty. One by one, the other alphas followed, offering their throats in the ancient gesture of fealty. The high priest, trembling, retrieved the fallen crown. "By the ancient bloodright and the law of our kind, I recognize Yuri William, true blood, as the rightful heir." He approached carefully, reverently. "Will you accept the crown, Your Majesty?" Yuri looked down at Kaelen, still frozen on his knees, his eyes burning with hatred and helpless defeat. "Take him to the dungeons. He will answer for his crimes before a proper tribunal." As guards, now loyal to her, dragged Kaelen and Lady Isolde away, Yuri knelt to receive the crown. The weight of it settled on her head like destiny fulfilled, and when she rose, every wolf in the cathedral howled in recognition of their true Alpha Queen. The reign of terror had ended. The age of justice had begun. The formal coronation took place under the full moon 6 weeks after Yuri reclaimed her throne. The same cathedral that had witnessed Kaelen's downfall now overflowed with wolves from every territory, come to pay homage to the true Alpha Queen who had ended a decade of tyranny. Yuri wore robes of deep black trimmed with gold, the colors of her wolf form, her grandmother's ring gleaming on her hand alongside the royal seal. As the high priest placed the crown upon her head and anointed her with sacred oils, she felt the weight of generations of true alphas lending their strength to hers. She was no longer the frightened, ashamed girl who had cowered in servants' quarters. She was power incarnate, justice personified, and she wore her authority as naturally as breathing. Long live the true Alpha Queen! The cry echoed through the cathedral, repeated by thousands of voices until the very stones seemed to shake with it. That night, she married Ronan in a private ceremony attended only by Alara and a handful of trusted advisors. No political spectacle, no grand display, just two mates binding themselves together under ancient vows, their wolves singing recognition through the bond they shared. "My queen," Ronan murmured against her lips as they sealed their union, and the title carried no subservience, only devotion. "My mate," she whispered back, and felt complete in a way she'd never imagined possible. The months that followed were a whirlwind of reconstruction. Yuri dismantled Kaelen's network of corruption piece by piece, rooting out those who had profited from his tyranny. She pardoned those who had been coerced or forced into compliance and showed mercy to those who genuinely repented. But for Kaelen himself and Lady Isolde, there was only justice. The tribunal was fair, thorough, and damning. Witnesses came forward with accounts of murders, extortion, and cruelty spanning years. When the final verdict was delivered, exile to the frozen wastelands beyond the territories, stripped of rank and wolf privileges, Kaelen's face showed only bitter hatred. "You may have won today, aberration," he spat as guards dragged him away. "But you're still the frightened little girl I tormented. You'll never escape that." Yuri met his gaze with calm certainty, her golden eyes glowing faintly. "I was never that girl. I was always this." She gestured to the crown, to the throne, to the kingdom bowing before her. "You just convinced me otherwise for a time. Thank you for finally giving me reason to prove you wrong." She never saw him again. Under Yuri's rule, the territories flourished. She established councils where common wolves could voice grievances, reformed the laws that had allowed alphas to abuse their power, and created sanctuaries for orphans and the vulnerable, children who would never feel as alone and worthless as she once had. Ronan stood beside her through it all, her partner in every decision, her comfort in moments of doubt, her strength when the weight of the crown grew heavy. Together, they were unstoppable. On the anniversary of her coronation, Yuri stood on the balcony of the royal palace, looking out over the capital city lit with celebration. Ronan's arms wrapped around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Any regrets?" he asked softly. Yuri thought of the girl she'd been, shamed, broken, believing herself worthless. Thought of the journey that had brought her here, every moment of suffering that had forged her into the queen she'd become. "None," she said, and meant it absolutely. Her hand moved to her stomach, where new life had just begun to quicken, an heir to continue the true Alpha Bloodline, a child who would never know shame or doubt their worth. She had been called wolfless, aberration, failure. She had been beaten down, mocked, and nearly destroyed. But she had survived it all and emerged not just whole, but transcendent. Yuri William, the last true Alpha Queen, had finally found where she belonged. Not in servitude or shame, but in power, in justice, in love, and in the unshakable certainty of her own worth. The moon rose full and golden above them, and from across the kingdom, wolves howled in recognition of their queen. Yuri tilted her head back and joined them, her voice carrying ancient authority and hard-won joy. She was home. She was powerful. She was free. And she was exactly where she was always meant to be.